Hello, and welcome back. Tonight, we're going to be going over some of the top scary stories from Reddit. We are currently on Volume 4 of this series. If you like this video, please be sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to get notified when I upload in the future. Now, let's get into the fearful findings. Don't fall asleep. Hundreds of customers come through the store each day, but none have ever made me feel the way this guy did. I find myself writing this to keep track of events, though I'd be perfectly happy if no more unfolded. I work in a gas station, and on my second week, I was asked to cover the night shift for Thursday and Friday. I hate to admit this, but I can be a bit of a suck-up when it comes to my jobs. I wanted to get off on a good foot, so I accepted. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about it, though. It was one of those conversations where the moment you turn away, you wish you hadn't agreed. I wouldn't tell you this if it didn't have some sort of relation to the story, but I'm a very anxious person. I take medication for it, and as of the last 2 days, I've been out. Now, if you've never taken drugs like this, stopping abruptly for any reason can cause some pretty unpleasant side effects. Drowsiness, insomnia, and nausea are the main ones, although some people, including me, can sometimes see things. Sort of like with sleep paralysis, a figure or creature or blob can show up, even if for just a few seconds. For me, it's always when I'm half asleep or exhausted, but it's always the same thing, a man. The man in the corner of the room. He doesn't move, he doesn't speak. He watches. And when I blink, sometimes he's gone. Sometimes he's closer. So it's best I take my pills. The late night shift was pretty pleasant for the first few hours. It was slightly busy for a while, but as midnight came closer, the people in the shop trickled out. While kneeling down behind a shelf to restock, I remember hearing the front door swing open. Though, I didn't register that someone was in the shop until the motion chime played. At this point, I had been stocking for hours, running on nothing but soda and 2 of those prepackaged burgers, so I was relying on autopilot to get me through the night. I made my way behind the front counter and noticed the time, 1:32 a.m. I remember sighing to myself, chin resting on my palm. I was exhausted, once again. I checked the cameras, and to my surprise, nobody was on them. I know I heard the chime, and so I leaned forward and really studied the cameras. It was at this point, the first sign of something strange going on, that I started to feel uneasy. I disregarded this, and in fact, I recall being sort of upset with myself. It was just a kid, or maybe someone forgot their wallet and went back out for it. Those were the things I said to ease my mind when I noticed something in one of the cameras that I hadn't seen before, a black figure standing in the corner of the store. My heart dropped into my stomach, and my eyes darted up towards that corner to see if there was someone there. Nothing. There were 2 things I thought it could be. My mind was playing tricks on me, and instead of being in my room, my brain just put him wherever it could. Or, there was just a guy wearing black in the store, and I was just being paranoid. I heard the door open earlier, but I never saw the person walk in. The weight of dread kept me in the chair, despite wanting to check. I remained in the safety of my little room at the front. It's the kind with the plastic wall covering and a door on the side, so I felt mostly protected there. Out of nowhere, somebody begins walking down one of the aisles and makes his way to me. "You're new," he said. He wasn't holding anything to buy. Now my internal alarm is blaring, but I tried to stay polite and told him it was my first night shift, and added that I was a little nervous about it. The moment I let those last 3 words slip off my tongue, he smiled. "Oh, I bet," he said. The man stood there for what felt like way too long. I thought that maybe he had a mental illness of some kind, but there wasn't anyone there with him to aid him. Maybe he didn't have anybody. I live right out by the woods back there, you know? He pointed behind me. I wasn't sure what to say to this. "It's a short trip then." "Huh?" A few moments went by in silence. "Can you show me where the chips are?" I pointed to the aisle they were on, and his smile disappeared. He snatched a bag of the chips and stared at it for a few seconds before setting it back down. He didn't speak another word to me, but he looked angry. Once he left, I looked at the cameras set up outside and saw him. He was staring at the camera. I couldn't look away, but after a few moments, he left, walking out toward the way he pointed earlier. What I didn't understand was why he asked me to show him where the chips were. He said I was new, as if he was familiar with the shop, or at least the employees. But none of my coworkers had ever heard of this guy, or at least they couldn't remember him based on my descriptions. It was obvious that he wanted me to leave the safety of that room, but why? I'm glad I didn't find out. The rest of the night, I sat watching the monitors, searching for any signs of him. I sort of expected him to, and I had even thought of letting the cops know, but he hadn't done anything, so they couldn't help. He never showed up again on the cameras. Honestly, I'm starting to think the whole thing was just in my head, and that this may have been my first real hallucination caused by my lack of medication lately. This didn't feel like one, though. It was as real as any other encounter I'd ever had. Maybe that means it's getting worse. I suppose that's what makes a hallucination truly terrifying, the inability to distinguish whether what you're looking at is real or just in your head. Every time the ball drops, 2021 starts over again, and I'm the only one who remembers. My name is Julie Winters. I was born on December 13th, 1996. I should be 39 years old now, but I'm not. I'm 24. I've been 24 for 16 years. I can't grow older. I can't die. I've tried both. I was here before. You were here before. All of us were here before. But somehow, nobody remembers. Nobody ever remembers. Only me. It's the same thing every time. December 31st, 2021. We're standing in the middle of Times Square, surrounded by revelers. The ball drops. The countdown begins. 3, 2, 1. And the calendar turns to January 1st, 2021. Again, in December of 2020, my friends and I had planned to go to Times Square for New Year's Eve, just as we always do. But this time, we were going with a special purpose, to bid farewell to the past year and embrace new horizons. Some friends even flew in a few days early for the event. When Prince and the Revolution said they were going to party like it's 1999, I think they had the right predictions, just the wrong year. But on December 30th, the police announced that although they would still drop the ball, nobody would be allowed in Times Square on New Year's Eve. To say that we were disappointed was the understatement of a lifetime. What would we do now? Sit at home and watch a live stream of the ball drop after friends flew here from across the country? They could have stayed home and done that. No, this was not going to go down like that. We were not going to be denied our rite of passage out of this year. When Clark Griswold drives across the country to take you to Wally World, you're going to Wally World, whether Officer John Candy opens the gate or not. I knew that many of the elites were being given permission to watch the ball drop from surrounding locations, and police presence was going to be cut by 80%, which definitely worked in our favor. The plan was to approach from several blocks away, avoiding 8th Avenue and 42nd Street at all costs. We would gradually get closer while maintaining an aloof presence, as if we were simply on our way somewhere else, not trying to enter the square. With these covert measures, it began to feel like we were trying to avoid detection by occupying forces. It was close to midnight when we made our approach. We couldn't go in early, or we'd risk being pushed out of the area completely by the police before the ball dropped. As some random, nameless pop star finished a bland cover of a John Lennon song, the 30-second countdown began. When the countdown hit 15 seconds, we picked up our pace. 10 seconds, we started running. A cop saw us and yelled, "Stop. You can't be here." But it was too late. We were already there, less than a block away from the ball as it landed, in perfect view. 3, 2, 1. Came through the broadcast in my earbud as the cop was just yards away from us. Happy New Year. I don't remember anything after that. All I remember is that we were in front of 1 Broadway Avenue when midnight hit, and suddenly, it was 3 a.m., and we were back at my place in Queens. I didn't say anything about my missing memory to the others, and they didn't say anything to me. I wondered if the occupying forces had been keeping people away for reasons other than a virus. The next New Year's Eve 2021, the same group of us met up, except for John. He couldn't make it this year. This time, the streets were full. Everything was back to normal. Or so I thought. Everything was going as you'd expect. The flavors of the month were lip-syncing their current radio hits. Talking heads from radio and TV were all talking into microphones and telling their audience how much fun they were supposed to be having. When the countdown reached 10 seconds, the crowd chanted along. 10, 9. Someone cracked a joke about Ryan Seacrest balls dropping. 3, 2, 1. Happy. And that's when I came to consciousness back at my apartment in Queens, along with my friends. The same friends. Including John, who couldn't make it this year. I turned on my TV and flipped through the playbacks of the celebrations. The number 2021 was splashed everywhere, even across the huge plastic glasses that they were all wearing. My phone said it was January 1st, 3 a.m. Just 3 hours prior, it was December 31st, 2021. I woke up the next day, thinking of what a strange dream that was. That is, until I started flipping through social media posts. Everybody was wishing everyone a happy 2021. I thought I must still be dreaming, but the dream didn't end. I continued living every day just as I had the year before. I knew when many things were going to happen before they happened. Some of the things that I didn't remember would hit me after they happened, making me laugh. I tried seeing a psychiatrist. I didn't tell them that I still thought I was repeating the previous year. I presented it as a thing that temporarily plagued me, but I was now aware that it was not real, and I was just trying to figure out how it happened and work with the fallout of it all. When the doc asked me if I still think I'm repeating the previous year, I hesitated before stumbling and saying no. I think he knew I was lying. My birthday came again on December 13th, and I turned 25. Again, as I had the year prior, before time reset. Again came New Year's Eve in Times Square. And again, at midnight, I awoke at 3 a.m. in my apartment in Queens, celebrating January 1st, 2021, with the same friends. And it happened again. And again. I tried changing things over the year, thinking that I did something wrong and needed to fix it in order for time to finally continue moving forward. None of this worked. After my 8th time repeating 2021, I decided that I couldn't take it anymore. I was going to end it. In mid-July of that cycle, I drove across the George Washington Bridge. Halfway across, I pulled over to the side and left. My next memory was of waking up in my apartment in Queens at 3 a.m., January 1st, 2021. I can't even die. No matter what happens to me, time keeps resetting. This year, one thing changed. After the ball dropped and the countdown hit 0, I did not suddenly wake up at 3 a.m. in my apartment. This time, on the stroke of midnight, we stayed exactly where we were on the street in front of 1 Broadway Avenue. The sea of revelers from December 31st, 2021, suddenly disappeared. 1 second prior, we couldn't move. Now, we were standing alone in front of the ball, streets empty. Still New Year's Day 2021. Just no 3-hour time and space shift to my apartment. I no longer care if I am deemed mad or insane. I am telling my story publicly in order to try to find anybody else who remembers the reset. I haven't yet met anybody who remembers. So, I am now casting the widest net possible by telling my story online. Please contact me if you remember. There has to be someone. Julie Winters. I still hear the footsteps in the rain every night. Since it happened, I've had the same nightmare. I know it's not over. I know there's only one way it can end. As soon as I close my eyes and lay down, I am there again. The sound is behind me again, the methodical, rhythmic splashing sound of the thing that is hunting me, the sound that I know heralds the end. I was a fool to get caught out in this, and now I know I will likely meet my fate, just as all my friends did before. Why did I try to make a run for it? Why did I assume I would make it out? No one is getting out of here alive. I dash ahead, my limbs burning, my heart racing. I fall face first into the water, then I wake up. No one believed my story, and why would they? Officially, everything was just a terrible accident. A vacation, a large body of water, people drown. Not often, almost an entire group of friends, but people drown, and that's what I was told as my claims were ignored. Always the fake concern looks as I gave my account. Eventually, those gave way to annoyance at my pressing of the subject. My friends' families even seem determined to chalk it up to an accident and insist that I am dishonoring their memories by trying to make such outrageous claims about what happened. But I know, I was there, and I know what I saw with my own eyes, and I know it was real. I know it was real because since it happened, I have scarcely left my house, and that is after moving to Nevada, the driest state I could think of. I decided to write this all down in the likely event that something happens to me. I know no one will believe this account either and assume that I am crazy, so I may as well share it with a broader audience. Maybe you will believe me. Maybe believe why the falling rain itself is a herald of my impending death, and why I will never be caught out in the rain as long as I live, as short as that might be. We should have listened to that sign. My name is Tim. My friends and I had gone on a summer break vacation to a fancy spa and resort by a lake, far out in the country. Good times, relaxation, a drink or two, a massage or 3, and maybe a chance to hook up with Becky if I played my cards right. We had just rounded the corner to a scenic vista that must be the road leading to the resort. The area was impressive, with beautiful forests, cool clean air, and a crystal blue lake, a small slice of summer heaven. We saw what must be the resort poking out through the tree line. Seeing we were close, my friend Adam gunned the engine of his old van and shouted, "Hang on, it's going to be a bumpy ride." And then, as if aiming for them intentionally, he hit a series of rough potholes on the road. We were all jostled around badly as we barely had enough space for all of us to fit in the first place, and Gina punched Adam in the arm and chided him for driving so recklessly. "All right, here we are," I thought to myself excitedly. I was genuinely looking forward to this. We were going to have a blast. We all practically fell out of the van, and we started unpacking what little amenities we had brought with us. Besides myself, there was Adam, our friendly but rather egotistical resident jock and my best friend. There was Adam's girlfriend Gina, a very no-nonsense and intense type who would probably be the CEO of her own company after finishing school. Becky, who was Adam's sister, was beautiful, kind, and a little shy but sometimes surprised us with how outgoing she could be. And finally, our resident know-it-all, Laura, the smartest person we all knew, and the only one whose ego was bigger than Adam's. We had originally planned to go to a concert this summer since we didn't think we could afford something as lavish as a resort stay. But some person in Adam's family knew the owners and got us a stay for much cheaper than we could afford otherwise. I was taken aback by the sights around the resort. Despite being almost eerie with how out of the way it was, the natural beauty made me forget all about how far away we were and how long it would take to get help if we needed it. We walked up to the main building and went inside. Oddly, there was no staff there at the counter where one would normally check in. Before anyone else could ask a question, Adam rushed forward and started smashing the bell on the counter and shouting, "Ring-a-ling-ding, I say room service," like an asshole. Gina sighed, Becky and Laura giggled, and I rolled my eyes while laughing a little as well. A large man in a too tight-fitting and not particularly seasonal turtleneck came out from a back room and went behind the desk. "Good afternoon. You must all be the..." He paused, looking down at a paper. "The Johnston party. Yes. That would be me and my associates. Good chap," Adam said in a bad English accent, and we all had to suppress another groan. Very good, said the concierge. "My name is Mr. Dalton. I will be attending your stay, along with Miss Llewellyn, who will be on call for all staff needs. I'm afraid you caught us during our off time. You see, the resort here is nearly shut down during hurricane season, so some amenities may not be available." I scratched my head in confusion. Wait, did he say hurricane season? But that's a lake, not the ocean. We are miles from it. What difference should hurricanes or possibly the odd thunderstorm cause for a forest resort? For safety purposes, we must also ask that you all sign these liability waivers before I give you your room keys. Due to the season, we will make every effort to, though cannot guarantee your safety, especially if you are caught out in a storm while partaking in some of our activities here. Laura perked up at that. "Liability waivers in case of accidental injuries or death," she said. "What kind of place is this? We should go, guys. This seems very sketchy." Adam, the normal voice of reason, assuming reason had about one too many, was already signing his form. He bellowed, "Come on, guys. It's not so bad. Probably just some weird insurance thing they have everyone do. Let's get it over with and go. I want to go swimming." Not wanting to be left out, we all agreed and reluctantly signed the waivers. Mr. Dalton smiled, handed us an antique-looking brass key, and led us to our room. It was a luxury suite that was very impressive, with several rooms, fine decor, 2 hot tubs, and an impressive view looking out over both the forest and the nearby Lake Kashur. Everyone was stunned by how nice this place was, especially with how cheap we were able to get it. Though we did notice it may have been so cheap because it seemed like we might be the only guests here during the season. Are people really that scared of storms this far away from the coast? I thought. I was bumped from my reverie by Becky, who accidentally dropped her bag right by me coming into the room. I bent down at the same time to help her pick it up, and we almost bumped our heads together. We each suppressed a little chuckle, and she smiled beautifully at me. It made me forget the quip I had come up with to try and poke fun at the situation, and I ended up staring dumbly until Adam grabbed my shoulder and said, "Watch where you are going, dude. That big head of yours is a lethal weapon." The girls chuckled, and I got a little red in the face and went on to my row. Inside the room was immaculate besides being a little dusty, and there was a faint musty smell, possibly due to disuse. I started putting away what little I brought with me. I hopped on the bed and stretched out. As I lay on the bed, I leaned up and looked around the row. I spotted an odd scratch mark on the wall by the closet. I got up and looked closer at it. It was painted over but not restored, so the grooves of the cut were still visible. What did that? I wondered. I opened the closet and found nothing other than a hanging robe, a box fan, an ironing board, and a small box tucked under the board. What was this? I puzzled. I opened the box and saw a handful of old photos, like old Polaroid style. It appeared to be footprints on the shore near the lake. The prints were strangely shaped, and there were more pictures of the prints in the forest dirt, a faint watery outline on what looked like a driveway, and even on a carpeted ground, which looked disturbingly like the same carpet the resort used in certain places. This was bizarre. Did someone have a foot fetish? I laughed to myself before becoming slightly concerned when I saw panicked handwriting on the back of the last one that appeared to be of the ground soaking wet with still falling raindrops captured in the picture. The photo was blurry but showed what looked like an outline of a person. The panicked writing read, "The rain." It was the rain. That sound. It was them. What the hell were these? I thought. Maybe someone was peeping on people and got busted. Or maybe someone was stalking the last person here. I thought of a few possibilities before I heard Adam shouting that dinner was ready. The staff, it seemed, despite the low number, had a solid cook, and we had a large dinner brought up to our room, which, to our shock, was complimentary. We all had a good time, and Gina, despite normally being the straight-edge type, had actually brought a rather large assortment of liquor, so it was not long before we were all shit-faced and partying like a proper summer vacation. It was starting to get late, and I was about to pass out when Adam and Gina both demanded that we all go swimming out at the lake since it was so nice and warm outside. We all agreed and changed into our swimsuits. As we walked down to the lake, we noted a rather prominent sign by the lake with a very large font indicating a strange rule. It said, "Absolutely no swimming in the rain." What a weird rule, I thought. Laura gawked at the sign as well and said, "Well, I have heard of not eating before swimming, but the rain has little influence on swimming safety in a closed lake with no boats about. And besides," Adam said boisterously, licking his finger and holding it up to the air, "there ain't any rain due in these parts for days." He snickered to himself over the sound of everyone's eyes rolling. Since the climate seemed okay, we splashed into the water and were soon swimming, singing, and having a good time. That was what I wished our whole vacation was like. I never thought such a catastrophe could happen at that point with how happy we all were. But it would start soon after. I hopped out of the water. Everyone was having a great time and thought it would be cool if we built a big bonfire by the shore and went to work trying to get the materials to make it. But my plan seemed thwarted as a large thunderclap pealed in the sky, and rain began to fall down onto the lake and the shore, the pattering raindrops ensuring that my hope of starting a fire was moot. Dang, I thought that would have been cool. Oh, we are going to be in trouble. Hope they don't throw us out. Ha ha ha, Gina said this time, rather drunk and uncharacteristically unserious. Yeah, but our towels are getting wet, I thought, and for some reason also thought of that strange picture from the room that mentioned rain. Becky got out of the water first, grabbed her towel, and came up near me under a close-by tree where I had attempted to make the fire. "Some time for a storm, eh?" I said rather lamely. "Yeah, sure is," she said, trying to humor my attempts at banter. What broke the awkward pause was a strong, almost searchlight-style light looking toward the water. It shined on us briefly, and as we squinted at it, we heard two sharp honks from a whistle, which almost sounded like an old steam engine. Before we knew what had happened, there was a commotion at the resort, and Mr. Dalton and the enigmatic Miss Llewellyn had jumped into a large red truck with warning lights on the top and thundered out of the lot. They were driving so fast I thought they might be coming for us since we had broken the rule. Just as it seemed like they were going to run us down, they veered off and started down the road, pausing only briefly to have Mr. Dalton roll down his window and say, "Bad luck, my friends. It was nice to have known you. Godspeed. And indeed, God knows you will need it for what comes next." He continued, saying, "We left the resort unlocked, but I don't believe it will be of much help. You must accept our deepest apologies. There is little we can do to help now. If you can escape, if you cannot, die well. We will notify your next of kin. Farewell." And he rolled up the window and sped off. What the hell does that mean? What was going on? I was panicked now, and so was Becky, who was looking back and forth as the rain intensified. They just left us? What is going on? She cried. I tried to calm her down, but I didn't know what that was all about either. Maybe it was some weird prank. What did we miss? Adam said, finally getting out of the water and lumbering towards us, still partly drunk. "The staff just left," I said. "They just up and left. They are gone. They said they left the resort open, but that they couldn't stay there. I don't know what kind of prank this is, but it's not funny. This stunt, The rain, the pictures. I was ranting, thinking maybe Adam set up this sort of thing as a big joke, but I saw the confusion on his and everyone else's faces and was afraid that this might indeed really be happening. What did they actually say? Laura asked as she approached as well. I explained what Becky and I saw, and then we looked at each other as if reading the other's mind and asked in unison, "Where's Gina?" "Hey, Gina babe, time to get out of the water," Adam shouted, a thunderclap almost cutting him off seconds after he shouted. "All right, if you buzzkills have to ruin it, I guess," she slurred as she slowly walked out of the water, a buzz grin still on her face. As she walked up and out of the water by a boat launch, we heard an odd sound, like the splashing footsteps she was making coming out of the water seemed to double somehow. It sounded like two people were walking out of the water, the other tread being much heavier and steadier. She must have heard it too, like us, because she paused briefly, almost as if to test the sound and see if it continued. After a brief delay, it did. Splash, 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 stop, stop, stop. Then it stopped. Gina turned around and said, "But I was going CRA," and she was wrenched off her feet to the ground, a sickening crunch being heard as her head smashed down onto the concrete. We saw her flailing and ran to help, but to our horror, she began getting pulled into the water by some unseen force, and her eyes and mouth began to leak water when she tried to scream. Adam and I grabbed her arms and tried to pull her back out, but we were kicked off our feet as well, and we heard even more watery footsteps and a disturbing gurgling sound. Adam was shouting and thrashing, trying to pull Gina out of the water with all his might. He cried out to her to breathe, as it looked like he was getting some response from her. Her mouth opened again, and water gushed out and enveloped his head as well. There was a splashing and sprinting sound of footsteps, and Adam was knocked back with such violent force he was launched into the lake, and rather than sinking, he just floated on the surface, convulsing and apparently drowning despite not being under the water. This spectacle was enough. Becky and Laura shrieked louder than I had ever heard anyone scream in my life and ran towards the resort, and I shook myself from my own terror-induced stupor and did the same. We made it inside, panicked and panting, shivering with cold terror. Our breath. I closed the door to the entryway, found a large lock, and slid it into place. We huddled around, not knowing what to say. Becky was crying, but Laura broke the silence. "What the fuck just happened there? That can't be real. They just drowned. Above the water. Those footsteps. What is going on?" I didn't know what to say. I just said, "We need to find a phone. We need to call for help. Maybe there's a landline here that actually has reception," since we knew the phones back in the room had not had service for miles before we got here. The rain was getting heavier. It was a downpour outside. As we searched around the entrance and the reception office, we found a phone, but our hope was short-lived. We picked it up, and the line was dead. There was nothing for emergency service, no radio, or anything else. We were stuck here alone. As my panicked and grief-stricken mind came to grips with this revelation, we heard and saw something unbelievable outside. Over the sound of the intense rain, we heard the heavy methodical approach of splashing footsteps. They stopped across the parking lot, splashing gouts of water where they landed, but no thing was making them that we could see. We held our collective breaths as the stomping, splashing footfalls approached the front door and stopped. There was a terrible silence, and for a moment, we thought nothing might happen. Then we heard what sounded like scratching on the glass, and then a terribly cutting sound as words began to appear being cut into the glass. We started to shake as we read the words. "Help us. We are drowning. Help us. We are your friends. You can't leave us." Becky let out a sob. "No, Adam, no. Is he still alive? We need to help him. My brother, he is dying." We stopped her from moving towards the glass, and as we stood there petrified by the invisible rider, we heard a knock and scratching at the back door, and then hideous gurgling sounds, like one's head being forced underwater, sounded from above as well. My heart felt like it stopped when we heard footsteps wetly clomping on the ground above us. Laura ran sprinting away toward the room. I couldn't breathe. I sat there dumbfounded. Becky grabbed my arm and was screaming at me, "They have Adam." I couldn't respond, so she ran toward the window where she said she saw him. She said he was on the ground, and he was drowning. She unlocked the door, and the sound of the bolt shooting back knocked me back into my conscious self. I barely had time to loose a strangled scream of "Becky, no." Then a cascade of water and the thunderous marching of wet footsteps rushed forward and bowled her out of the door and into the drenched ground beyond. I saw her terrified look, and she looked back at me, and her scream was cut off by some unseen hand smothering her with that impossible water. I ran. I ran as fast as I could. I tried to get to the room where Laura was, but as I reached the door and frantically tried it, I realized I didn't have the key. I screamed for Laura to let me in, but I heard nothing on the other side of the door, only footsteps behind me, slow, wet, padding footsteps over the carpeted floor of the resort. I screamed as I lowered my shoulder and barged into the door once, twice, 3, then 4 times until finally, it broke on a hinge and fell forward. The padding footsteps were behind me, and when I fell into the room, I saw Laura with her hands over her ears, huddled on the couch, almost catatonic. "Come on," I shouted. "We have to go now." I beseeched her, but she was utterly unresponsive. The footsteps were in the room now, slowly moving toward the middle. My heart sank, but I fled and left the footsteps to catch up to and engulf her. I am only thankful I didn't have to hear the scream. I slammed my door shut, grabbed my bag with my phone, personal effects, and everything else, and closed myself in the closet of my room. I heard the footsteps, then the knocking, then the scratching, then the voices. "Help us. We are stuck under the water. Only you can save us. Save us. Help us. It hurts. The water. There's too much. We are drowning." I held my hands over my ears as well, closed my eyes, and hoped and prayed for an end to this, that maybe this was all just a terrible dream. After what felt like ages, the sound stopped. The voices, the footsteps, the scratching, it was all quiet now. I noticed the rain had stopped as well. The rain, maybe it was somehow connected to it. The goddamn rain. We were swimming in the lake, and it started to rain. Did those bastards know this could happen? Was that what the waivers were for? My hands curled into fists. I couldn't believe it. I redoubled my will and fought on, determined to at least make them pay for knowingly risking my friends' lives and getting almost all of us killed. If it stopped raining, I could get away. I needed to get out of here. I cautiously opened the door and looked outside. Nothing grabbed me, and no watery footsteps were moving anywhere. It was dead silent. I walked out slowly through the hall to the living room, fearing what I might see, but Laura was gone. I felt ashamed and guilty that I had not tried to grab her and run to the safety of her room. I slowly walked out of the room and downstairs. The wind was still kicked up, and the front doors were hanging open, creaking in the blowing wind. It was almost morning. A faint light crept into the entryway. I had gotten Adam's keys from his room and should be able to get away using the van. My eyes darted frantically, and I looked around, peeking outside to see ominous clouds, but thankfully no rain at the moment. I slowly walked to the parking lot, my heart racing at the sounds of my own footsteps, making sure I didn't hear another behind or in front of me. I got to the van and thought I might actually make it. Yet as I pressed the unlock button on the fob, a thunderclap resounded from over the hills, and in moments, a morning shower had begun, rain pattering off of me and the van. I froze at first, and then exploded into motion, reaching for the door to open it when I saw inside and fell backward in indescribable horror. Adam and Gina, or at least their boneless-looking bodies, slowly writhed up into the front seats of the van, almost as if being moved into position like some demonic marionette puppets. I stood there, mouth agape in horror, as Adam's face slunk toward me and his mouth opened. Water gushed out and began filling the cabin and spilling out. The corpse things that used to be my friends moved to open the doors, and the wall of water rushed out to meet me. They remained, collapsing onto the dashboard, but the splashing footsteps began immediately coming toward me again. I screamed like a madman and broke for the woods, the implacable footsteps never receding too far behind, no matter how fast I ran. It felt hopeless. My energy was all but spent, and I ran past my limits in a pure, desperate bid to survive. My whole body was aching, and I could barely breathe, but I kept running. I knew if I stopped, I would die. I thought I could see what might be a main road. Maybe the thing might not be able to follow me past a certain point, but just as I approached the road, I tripped over my own tired feet and some vines and fell into a ditch by the road that was filled with water from the flash flood. I rolled over, spitting water out and screaming and panting and defiantly challenging my fate. I stood in the water that was up to my waist. I looked back the way I came. I heard nothing. I let out a sigh of relief, and I thought, could this really be over? There was a painstaking silence. I exhaled and turned around to try and climb out of the ditch. Then I heard it, just like I've been hearing it in my nightmares ever since. The footsteps in the rain. To this day, I don't know how or why I got away when my friends died. I don't know why I'm sharing this, maybe survivor's guilt. Either way, I don't think I will be around much longer. There's no way I can avoid the rain forever. It's still out there somehow. It can follow me wherever I go, and as soon as the rain starts falling, Those footsteps start falling as well. I moved to the driest state in the country, but it won't be enough. Even when it's not raining, I hear it in my nightmares. I think of my friends being drowned before my eyes. I still hear their screams. It still feels so real, just like that faint sound I hear. No, it couldn't be. I checked the forecast this morning, yet as I write this, it sounds like thunder in the distance and perhaps a light pattering of rain. Please excuse me. I had better lock the doors. I hear the footsteps now and know I will be having visitors soon. My squad and I came across something terrifying in Iraq. Things changed forever when those towers came down in 2001. I was 19 at the time, eager to enlist, and that's exactly what I did. I became a soldier, longing to kill as many of the bastards behind the attacks as I could. I don't regret enlisting, but there's one city in Iraq that I wish I had never stepped foot in. In 2003, the US government sanctioned and conducted a full-scale invasion of Iraq. I was among the boys sent over there, and personally, I thought what became known as the Iraq War was going to end in a week, and it was only a matter of time until we had Saddam Hussein's body. My squad and I were sent into a small city. No, I won't give away the name, to assist in clearing buildings with Marines, with SEALs providing overwatch from various rooftops. It was simple, but it was brutal, and I wanted nothing more than to be back home. Walking upstairs with 40 to 60 pounds of gear, finding locals who were told to evacuate long before we took the city, in the heat of the Middle East didn't help anything. We cleared structures well into the evening, and by nightfall, we came across what appeared to be apartments. We stopped for the night in one of these apartments, taking advantage of whatever food we could find. By midnight, we were all pretty worn out, and some of us were already asleep. Not me. I lay there, staring at the ceiling as jets and helicopters whirred in the distance. If not the sound, the faces of the few men I had killed in combat up to this point really kept me awake. I was about to drift off to sleep when I was jolted back up by an unfamiliar sound. I know what sounds I should be hearing right now. Tanks, jets, gunshots, all of which should be in the distance, well away from where we were set up. But it sounded like it shouldn't be here. It sounded like laughing. I sat up and listened again, trying to hear it. It didn't sound like it was coming from inside the apartment or the building, for that matter. It sounded just as distant as the other noises, but was nonetheless there. It sounded like a little kid, like they were having the time of their life doing whatever they could possibly be doing. It was weird certainly, but I was too tired and sore to care much. I slowly drifted to sleep again. I was awoken by someone in my squad. For the sake of anonymity, we'll call him John. He shook me awake and told me to come look at something. As I stood up, I noticed my other squad mates were gazing out the window, carefully trying not to give their presence away to whatever it was they were looking at. Look across the street in the second-story window. There's somebody watching us, man, John said to me. I looked out of the window, and sure enough, even in the darkness of the street outside, I could see the silhouette of what appeared to be a person. They were standing motionless, in the direction of us. I squinted my eyes to make sure what I was seeing was correct. How long had they been standing there? I asked. No idea. Wolowitz got up to go take a piss and just so happened to see him, John replied. I looked over at Wolowitz, who was our other squad mate, as he nodded his head confirming John's story. You think it's a scout? Somebody spoke up. I mean, maybe, but that building should be cleared. There's not supposed to be anybody on this street but us, John said. He was right, which made the situation more odd and concerning. John, you still got that rifle with the thermal scope? I asked. John nodded and left briefly to grab it from its leaning position against a wall. He brought it back, and knowing what I was asking, looked down the scope, switching it to thermal imaging. He looked from the scope to the window with his eyes, and then back to the scope again, before bringing the rifle to me and saying, Dude, look, no heat signature there. It probably isn't a person at all. I looked down the scope, and John was right. It looked like I was staring into an empty window, but when I brought the gun down, there was clearly something there. It might be a mirror or a coat rack or something, someone said. I thought they may have been right, until we all looked at the window again, and saw whatever or whoever it was walk away from the window out of sight. What the fuck? John and I said at the same time. I grabbed my radio to call this in. Grab your shit. We're going over there once we get clearance. If they're a scout, we'd better grab them soon, I said. Everybody started milling about, grabbing their vests and their guns. I got into a small argument with HQ about what I saw. I basically had to beg them to let us go over there to check it out, but I was given the green light. Looking back on the situation, I didn't feel any fear going into that building across the street. Confusion, yes. Nervousness, yes. But I wasn't scared of what I was going to find. John hung back at the apartment to provide overwatch with his rifle. I split the squad up, sending half to the back of the building to watch for any escapees, and half with me as we headed into the front to clear it. We put small explosives on the front metal door and breached. Just as we had 100 times before, we headed in, clearing floor by floor. We reached the top floor and found nobody. The place was completely empty. You see anybody come out? I radioed to my guys covering the back. Negative, they replied. We checked the basement for any tunnel systems, but found nothing. There was no way to access the roof, so this left us all pretty puzzled. Where the fuck did they go? I thought to myself. Bang. We all ducked for cover. It was a single gunshot, followed by screaming that I'll never forget. Terrified screams, coming from the apartment across the street. Shit, John, I said aloud, as we all rushed out of the building and back across the street. The guys around back heard what was up too and tagged along. We made it back to the apartment, and what I saw there will stay with me for the rest of my life. John was laying in a pool of his own blood, with a look of terror on his face. It didn't take a doctor to tell he was already gone. His rifle lay beside him on the ground. But that's not what was weird. What was weird was that his hands and his feet, along with his tongue and eyeballs, were all gone. Oh fuck, someone said. What the hell happened? Someone else said. I had no answer. Look at the walls, someone said. I looked at the wall, and there was what appeared to be bloody hand and footprints lining the walls and ceiling. It was as if someone had killed John, removed his body parts somehow, and then made off with them by crawling the walls and ceiling to the other side of the apartment. I was furious. I was on the verge of tears. John had been one of the few men I made friends with during the godforsaken war. I pointed my rifle ahead of me and followed the prints. I followed them to a far room on the other side of the apartment. Then they stopped. It was like whoever, more like whatever, it was, just vanished. Of fucking course, I whispered. We bugged out from that location with John's body. I couldn't imagine the look on his mom's face when she saw her baby like how we found him. I attended the funeral back home. His mom, along with the army, asked what had happened. We just told them that John had been found by some sicko and that we couldn't get to him in time. My squad and I still operated after that. But out of respect, and fear at least on my part, we don't talk much about what happened that night. I share this hoping that somehow, someone can tell me what I saw or has a similar story. Something happened at Mardi Gras, and they're covering it up. It's taken me quite some time to decide whether to tell anyone about this. With Mardi Gras coming up again soon, I wanted to make sure people were warned and know what happened. Something happened at Mardi Gras last year, and it's being covered up. Every word of what follows is true. My friends and I decided to go to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. I've always heard that the city was a non-stop, 24-hour, year-round party. I've also heard that the days leading up to Mardi Gras take this to the extreme. There were 3 of us all together. Myself, Chris, and Sam. We decided to arrive 3 days early and build up to the actual day of Mardi Gras. We drove down, taking turns at the wheel so we wouldn't have to stop at any hotels along the way. The first night, Saturday, was our first night there. We're from New Jersey, where it was about 30 degrees Fahrenheit when we left. But when we arrived in New Orleans, it was in the 80s and very humid. Our hotel was right on the Mississippi River, and our room had a waterfront view. We settled in, cleaned up, and went out to walk around and check things out. We slowly aimed ourselves toward the French Quarter, checking out as much as we could along the way. I was a bit shocked that we could just buy beer from vendors right on the street and walk around, unbothered by police. We can't do that in Jersey. All in all, we had a great time, great food and drink, and retired to the hotel around 4 a.m. while the city was still buzzing. As tired as I was, it took a while to fall asleep due to the loud people partying in the hallway and surrounding rooms. The second night, Sunday, we went to check out Harris, the casino, and then we made it back out to the streets for the atmosphere and alcohol once again. While walking around, we met a girl named Antoinette, Tony for short, who told us that she was a local and that she was going to college there. Tony suggested we all go to a little restaurant just slightly out of the area, called Le Bon Temps, pronounced Le Bata. That translates to the good times in English. We all headed down together, and it was a pretty cool little place. While we were there, I witnessed something that I had previously thought was only done in sitcoms. In the middle of our dinner, the door to the kitchen flew open, slamming against the wall. Out from the kitchen walked a large man, using one hand to carry a smaller employee by the back of his shirt collar. The guy being carried looked like there was something wrong with him. His eyes were half closed and bloodshot, while his face was almost pure white, completely void of expression. The larger man carried him by the back of his shirt all the way across the restaurant to the front door, where he pushed him outside and shut the door behind him. On his way back to the kitchen, the large man said, "Sorry, folks, but you just can't show up to work stoned out of your gourd like that." There were some giggles from the patrons in reply. We all drank quite a bit that night, and I ended up staying at Antoinette's place, about a mile away. Chris and Sam said they were going to stay out for a while longer and then go back to the hotel. The third night. The next day, Monday, I texted my friends that I'd meet up with them later that evening. I spent the day with Antoinette, and we had a great time. I started wondering if this was too much for me to be getting into, allowing myself to get involved with a girl like this when I live so far away. She was definitely someone who I would want to pursue a relationship with, but I knew I'd be leaving town without her in just a few days. I decided to push these thoughts away and let the proverbial chips fall where they may. We had 2 more days. Anything could happen. While Tony and I were walking back downtown later, I noticed there was a girl walking about a block behind us who seemed to be pretty out of it. I couldn't tell if she was drunk, high, or what. Tony told me to just ignore her, as she hurried me along. Once we got to the corner where we were meeting up with Chris and Sam, things began to get strange. As we were crossing the street, I felt a hand on my back, almost like someone was pushing me, although rather weakly. I turned around and realized that it was the girl who was walking a block behind us earlier. She wasn't actually pushing me, though. It appeared that she needed to hold on to something to avoid falling over. We stopped and asked her if she was okay, and she just sort of grunted. At this point, I think we all became concerned. She started mumbling a bit, saying things like, "My name is Emily, I was with friends, but now I'm here, and I live here, that way," pointing in a direction that was blocked by a parade route. I asked her, "What happened? Did you lose your friends?" To which she did not reply. We were standing right in front of a Burger King. I asked the crowd if someone could get a cup of water for her. Everyone who heard me just looked the other way and kept walking, some giving me the evil eye, as if I had done something wrong. A BK employee near the door said, "You get her out of here now," slamming the door shut. I noticed that Tony was staring at Emily with a very serious look on her face. Tony whispered into my ear, "She isn't drunk. We should get out of here." I replied, "But shouldn't we help her? She's really messed up. We can't leave her here to die." Tony begrudgingly said, "All right, but let's make this quick." We each got on one side and carried Emily along with us down the block, where we came across a security guard standing in front of a parking structure. I stopped and asked the guard if they could help. I explained that we didn't know what was wrong with her, but that she needed attention, and possibly a ride to the hospital. The guard looked at me like I was stupid. Tony gave her a shrug. The guard then refocused on Emily. She reached into Emily's backpack, rifled around a bit, and pulled out an ID card. The guard then said, "I'll take care of this and get her an ambulance. You can go on your way." Tony started pulling me along as I said thank you to the guard. As we were all walking, I asked Antoinette, "What did you mean when you said she wasn't drunk? Is there something going on that we don't know about?" Tony just said, "There's a lot of strange things going on around here that you don't want to know about." And neither do I. My friends kind of laughed, and we moved along. We had some drinks and got back into the celebratory mood. Chris mentioned that he had been wanting to check out one of the New Orleans cemeteries that he had read about. Tony did not look enthused, but Chris was already in motion. He walked over to one of the police officers who were standing guard and asked, "Hey, do you know where the closest cemetery is?" The officer looked him dead in the eye and stared for a few seconds. Then, "And no, this is not a joke, even though it sounds like a bad slasher movie line," he said, "There's one just a few blocks over that way, but you don't want to be going down there." Chris smirked. "Why not?" The officer replied, and again, he really said this. "It's not just a cheesy line from a horror movie. They don't really like your kind over there." I have to be honest. I was kind of freaked out by this interaction, and Tony wasn't looking happy. Chris said, "Come on, nothing's going to happen. This isn't a horror movie." After a long sigh, I replied, "I guess it can't hurt." I've heard that the cemeteries are a sight to see around here. We embarked on Chris' quest, much to the chagrin of the rest of the group. There was quite a change in the look of the city as we got closer to the cemetery. It went from historic New Orleans chic to something much less visually appealing. As we drew closer, I started to see and feel eyes on all of us. As we walked the final stretch to the cemetery entrance, there were at least a dozen people standing on their front porches and in their front yards, looking at us like we were about to do something really stupid. "We shouldn't be here," Tony said quietly. "Well, we are here, so let's just be quick about it," I said. When we got to the front gate, it was locked. Apparently, visiting hours were over. "Oh no, I guess we have to leave." "Too bad," said Tony. Despite our misfortune, we could still see all of the large, creepy, and wonderful burial structures through the wrought iron fencing. Because New Orleans is below sea level, bodies are buried above ground. The arrangement of the structures in the cemetery actually looked like a small city. A city of the dead. The eyes were now piercing the backs of our heads, and we knew something was going to happen if we didn't get out soon. But Chris started walking the perimeter of the fencing until he happened upon a crevice big enough for him to try and squeeze through. He told us to follow him. I was hesitant, and Tony was telling me that we need to leave, but I figured a quick adventure inside couldn't hurt. We'd be gone in a few minutes, not even enough time for police to arrive and catch us. So we all squeezed through, one by one. It was getting pretty dark now, and this was really starting to feel wrong. I was just waiting for the doors to start opening and the dead to come out and greet us. I decided I was done with this place, and said to Chris, "All right, we're going back. This is just disrespectful, and the locals obviously don't want us here." He shot back, scared. "Huh." I ignored him. We all squeezed back out, one at a time. Tony went just before me, and I was the last one out. I had a feeling like someone else was behind me, even though I was the last one. Before going through, I looked behind me, and I could swear that in the darkness, the door on one of the structures looked like it was sliding open. I could even hear the faint sound of a cement block scraping across the ground. I'm sure it was just my imagination, but this made me decide to get the heck out of there with the quickness. We walked silently at a much quicker pace back to the more populated downtown area. The noise and lights in the French Quarter seemed to welcome us home. Tuesday, Marty Gras, Carnvale, a farewell to the flesh. Today, the streets were twice as crowded as they had been the night before. This was the big day. Tons of new tourists filled the streets, to the point that we literally couldn't even walk on Bourbon Street. We attempted to, but got stuck in the crowd like someone had tried to fit 100 crayons into a box that was only meant for 50. If anything happened here, we simply wouldn't be able to move or get out of the way. For the rest of the day, we stuck to the side streets. As the parades carried on, it became more and more difficult to even go anywhere else, as they were blocking the streets, and thus blocking any way for us to go in the direction that we wanted. At this point, we kind of gave up and decided, if we can't beat M, we join M. "Let's just go watch one of the parades," I said. The others were indifferent. We all grabbed drinks and walked toward one of the main streets of the city as nightfall was beginning to close in on us. On our walk, we came upon some sort of dance troupe in the street. There were probably a dozen people in the troupe, all dressed in dark red, tribal-looking outfits. Along with their dance, a few played hand drums, and they were all singing in what may have been French. I couldn't understand what they were saying, though. At some point, the woman in front who appeared to be the leader of the troupe caught my eye and stared with a look as if she was not happy to see me. I saw her look over at Antoinette, then avert her gaze as if she had been caught. "Let's go," said Tony. As we walked away, I looked back and saw that the woman was staring again, with the same unhappy look on her face. A few minutes later into our walk, we started to see ahead down the street where it was looking more and more congested with people, to the point of it looking like the main floor of a sold-out rock show. I wondered how these people could deal with being so compressed together. Tony spoke up. "We want to stay away from anything that crowded," she said. The rest of us agreed. I said, "Well, let's just get a little closer. We don't have to get right in the pit, but I do want to see what's so exciting over there." We kept walking. As we got closer, something started to seem a bit more clear. Not all of the people were making noise because they were having fun. Some of the merry-making noises turned out to be screams. As we moved closer, despite Antoinette's objections, I noticed a small huddle of people in the center. Someone was on the ground. I hurried up to the circle and pushed my way to the inside. What I saw there left me frozen in my tracks. There were two people. One was laying on their back, motionless. The other was on their knees, hovering over the one on the ground, and it looked like they were eating their face. Blood was spewing everywhere while Gawker screamed in terror. Tony grabbed my arm from behind and said, "I told you, we have to go." She pulled at my arm, but I couldn't avert my gaze from what was happening. Eventually, she pulled hard enough that I lost balance, sort of fell over, then got back up and started retreating with her. When we got back outside of the circle, we saw that there was another of the exact same scene happening maybe 20 feet away from us in another direction. "What is happening?" I screamed. Then, the first circle we saw was dispersing rapidly as the flesh eater abandoned their meal and started seeking dessert in the crowd. Just like that, another was incapacitated on the ground, becoming seconds. But there was something else that I noticed while the thing was rising to look for its next victim. It was Emily, the girl who followed us the previous night. Tony told us that we were going to need to get to her place. As we began running, there were more and more of these things attacking and eating others. Where were they all coming from? If this wasn't horrifying enough, I then received the answer to my question. Some of the flesh eaters were missing faces themselves. Just bone, blood and remnants of skin where their faces used to be. And they were using these skeletal faces to eat those of others. They weren't coming from anywhere. They were being created by the other flesh eaters. As one walked away from their meal, I saw the body of their victim rise and begin chasing their own mark. I was transfixed on this horrific, spontaneous public meltdown of society happening right before our eyes, when I was suddenly thrust to the ground with great force. I never saw it coming. I had no idea what was happening. I eventually focused and realized that I had one of these faceless flesh eaters hovering over me. Blood was dripping from their jowls onto my face. I knew it was all over for me. Before I could even scream, Antoinette suddenly appeared face to face with the creature hovering over me. Except, she looked different. Her eyes were blood red, and she appeared to have a large set of fawn-like teeth protruding from her open mouth. She used one hand to pick up the creature, bringing it face to face with her. She stared directly into its eyes and let out a guttural, terrifying sound like I've ever heard. Whatever this was. The creature was afraid of Tony. She dropped it, and it scrambled off immediately. She looked at me with her new face and shouted, "Get up and follow me. They won't touch you now." We ran behind her the rest of the way, tears in my eyes as I tried to figure out what was happening. When we got to her place, Tony locked the doors and then shook some sort of liquid out of a bottle onto the floor in front of each of the doorways and windows. "This won't be over until morning," she said. Her face was back to normal now. We all stayed together in the living room that night. I knew that Tony would keep us safe. When daylight broke, she alerted us that it should be safe now, but that we needed to leave the city and go home immediately. We piled into her car so that she could drive us back to ours at the hotel. As we drove, I noticed that the streets were now empty, save for what appeared to be cleanup crews picking up the aftermath. Some were power washing the ground where there appeared to be dark stains. There were no bodies, and no flesh eaters out seeking breakfast, from what I could see. We were all dead silent for the entire drive, focused on what was happening outside our windows. Tony turned on the radio to a news station, and they were reporting that several people had died in what they called parade float accidents the prior day. As Tony said goodbye to us, she hugged me and put a note in my pocket. I haven't had the courage to read it yet. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to get notified when I upload in the future. Thanks for watching. I appreciate the support, and have a good night.